Our scripture reading is going to be in John chapter 5. My fingers aren't working very good, so I'll get there in a minute. First, John chapter 5, starting in at verse 1. And this is a story of Jesus healing a lame man. Now, Jesus heals a lot of people during the course of his ministry. The apostles heal a lot of people in the course of their ministry. This particular one here was a lame man, it says. Said he was 38 years old. And they're all waiting around a pool. Now, the pool, it says, is called Bethesda, my translation. And now some of the very old manuscripts leave part of this out, but now the King James, some in the New King James, they say that what was everybody waiting around the pool about? Do we need to read that to refresh everybody's memory? Healing water. You know, that's something that people's always been in search of, and it's healing water. You know, I think the guy's name was DeSoto. He was looking for water that would be everlasting life, keep him young all the time. The water in Hot Springs, Arkansas, at one time, you know, it was big. They sent people down there, but it was supposed to, the warm mineral water was supposed to have healing effects. Here these people are all waiting around a pool. And what are they waiting on, according to the translation? An angel to stir the water. Now, the very earliest manuscripts they found leaves this out about an angel troubling the water. But they were all convinced that they wouldn't have been hanging around there, would they? They were all convinced there was some kind of healing power in this water. Let's read the first 9 verses. It says, after these things there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool, which is called in Hebrew Bethesda, having 5 porticos. In these lay a multitude of those who were sick, blind, lame, and withered, waiting for the moving of the waters. For an angel of the Lord went down in certain seasons into the pool and stirred up the water. Whoever then first, after the stirring up of the water, stepped in was made well from whatever disease with which he was afflicted. And this, all of verse 4 and the last part of verse 3 is left out of some of the earliest manuscripts they found. We're going to go ahead and what we got. A man was there who had been ill for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been a long time in that condition, he said to him, "Do you wish to get well?" Well, that there is, that question essentially answered itself, didn't it? Even if he had been laying by the pool, a crippled person would, they want to get well. So the sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no man to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up. While I am coming, another steps down before me." Jesus said to him, "Get up, pick up your pallet and walk." Immediately the man became well and picked up his pallet and began to walk. It was the Sabbath on that day. Okay? Now, like I say, the earlier translations or writings, manuscripts left out the part about the angel. But these people were all convinced there was a healing presence in that water, wasn't they? They wouldn't have been waiting around there for, if it was just like the mineral water in hot springs, they'd just jumped in. Rolled in or whatever, but it was a special occasion when the waters moved. That's when they believed that they would be healed. The first one in would be healed. And evidently it was a very popular belief among the people, because it said there's a multitude of people there. It wasn't just a few people there. There's lots of people there waiting, and I'm sure they waited each day. But the crippled man said, I don't have anybody to pick me up and put me in there. Time I crawl over there, somebody else has already got in the water. And there he's already mad and trying to leave. He's looking for the ice cream James fed him the other day, I think.
Nobody was going to help this guy because they worried about themselves first.
Everybody's worried about themselves first, wasn't they?
Well, I'm going to stop and help you. We got to get there before it.
Yeah. And he'd been there. He'd been down for 38 years. Nobody's going to help him. You know, this place is covered. You know, it's just covered up with people that are all names all kinds of different ailments that they people had. Yes. I didn't hear all of that. Say it again. Not that I know about. I have Johnson's Notes. It's a book on the New Testament commentary, and he didn't have any. He thought it was just something maybe that people had become convinced it was going to happen. You know, it wasn't any previous, things about it anywhere. In fact, he was skeptical that it actually healed anybody. The Johnson fellow was. Take that for whatever it's worth. But these people were all convinced it worked. Yes, Mr. Brown.
Hot water will thin the blood and help circulate.
Okay, yeah.
That man, Christ did a miracle.
Yeah, he did a miracle, didn't he? Yeah. Anything else? We find it that Jesus asked him, do you want to get well? I mean, of course he did. Of course he did. He wouldn't have been there if he hadn't believed there was healing power in the water. He wouldn't have been there to start out with. He was counting on this water. I'm looking for anything to get well. People do that today, don't they? Do I?
That's what I was getting ready to say. The world looks for things today and will believe most anything.
Yes.
But the one thing that they need to believe is that Jesus is who can heal.
Yes. My one example, my grandmother had rheumatoid arthritis, very bad, and the crippling kind. And anyway, my dad said my grandpa sold all the cows, spent all the money they had trying to find a cure, which there still isn't really any cure today. But there were people who said they were selling a cure, and they tried them all until all the money was gone. So people who are really in pain or really in a bad way, they'll do anything. If they're determined to live and determined to get better, they'll try almost anything.
You remember Aunt Norma Fisher?
Yes, same.
Came to church in a wheelchair for years
Yes,
and always had a smile on her.
she always had a smile. Now, I don't think my grandmother always had a smile on her face, but
No
anyway.
matter how much she hurt.
Yes, she was inspiration to anybody that had an ailment. Because I never seen the lady without a smile on her face. And I can't describe how bad her hands were. But if you went to visit her at her house, she had a knitting needle in each hand, and she was making Afghan or whatever it is that they make with. But she'd sit there and do that all day long.
That was
Keep her hands going, yeah. But every time I was ever at her house, she was doing that, and always smiling and never talking bad about anybody that I was ever around. Do I? She taught you how to crochet, see? Yeah. She was a lovely lady. But what I'm trying to say is if people will spend anything or try anything, and that's what these people were doing. They were convinced that this water was going to heal them, and so they were there waiting on the water to move. And yes, I said about the hot springs. The word got around to the hot springs. So they had, back in the 30s and 40s, they had houses after house, places where people went. In fact, the government even sent veterans there to try to be healed of different ailments because of the hot water and the minerals. But Jesus had the gift, had the power, because he was the Son of God, to heal this man. He didn't gradually get better. He didn't get better in a week or two. He got better right then. He got better immediately. You know, and that's the thing. You know, if we go to the doctor, very rarely, if whatever ailment we got today, that you get instantly better. Most of the time, it's they can get you on the road to getting better, but you have to rehabilitate yourself. Janice Swink back there just had her shoulder operated on, and as far as the doctor's concerned, they got it fixed. But she's got to, but she's not going to be able to lift sack speed today, and probably not tomorrow. But she'll have to rehabilitate herself, even though but this man here, he was able to just get up and start walking. He was instantly cured. And that's the way that the miracles in the scriptures, people were instantly cured. One man who had never walked, he was able to jump up and run. And he never, with these little fellas around here, they got to learn how to walk. That guy had never walked, but yet he didn't have to learn. He just jumped up and went running around. We stopped at the last part on verse 9. No, it wasn't. It was verse 9, verse 10. But anyway, it makes a statement, and that's supposed to be the end of our reading, but that's really one of the places to start with. It says it was on the Sabbath day. So what is the Jewish rulers, what is their reaction to this man being healed of this? Yeah, well, I said, what are you doing carrying your bed around with you? That's classified as work. That's against the rules. Who told you? Well, the guy to heal me. He said, thinking, that's all I'm going by, And Jesus healed several people in his ministry on the Sabbath day. These same, and he convicts them of hypocrisy because they don't want a sick person healed on the Sabbath day. But he said, if you got an animal that's stuck in the ditch or in a pit, you're not going to say, well, I can't work today. I'll have to come back tomorrow and get him out because tomorrow he'll be dead. You're going to get him out that day. People are worth more than the livestock. People were more than livestock. But this happened on several different occasions where the Jewish rulers, because they don't want to accept who Christ is, they want to pick apart what actually happens. In another class this morning, we studied about Stephen, and if you study about Stephen, his sermon is in so many areas is parallel to the one that Peter preached on the first day, on the day of Pentecost. History of the Jews and Abraham and what have you, and then up to Christ. Peter was preaching to the common people. And when he told them that they had killed the Son of God, that their reaction was, well, what are we going to do now? It can't be anything to get us away from, the relief or pardon for killing the Son of God. And of course, he gives them the pardon. Stephen is preaching or teaching the Jewish leaders. When he convinces them they have killed the Son of God, what is their reaction? Let's get a bunch of big rocks and get rid of him. Said they didn't want to hear it no more. They put their hands over their ears. Like I said, the both sermons are pretty well parallel to each other, covered many of the same subjects, had two completely different reactions. But here we have this man here who in 1 minute had no hope whatsoever. And the next minute, he was able to get up and carry his, even didn't have to worry about somebody carrying him. He could carry his own bed and leave. And that's what, in a spiritual sense, that's what can happen for us today. We can be like the people that Peter preached to. They were a place of no hope because he convinced them, you killed God. And they said, what are we going to do now? But he gave them a way of hope. Jesus gives us a way of hope. Because there's no way we can live a perfect life. He's the only one that's ever lived a perfect life. If anybody tells you that they don't ever sin, well, you got them caught right then because they're telling you a lie. Scripture says all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. Everybody sins. Sometimes we don't mean to. Sometimes it's an accident. Sometimes we do mean to. But later we'll repent of it. But through Jesus and his blood on the cross, if we come in contact with it, then we have an avenue for relief, an avenue for pardon. Leland, you got any questions? I'm depending on you to ask a question too. They are no better than give me 9 verses and trying to get me to talk. You're waiting on, well, that's way past, that's not on a nice lesson. Just a minute, we got Brother Brown's got a question, yes.
Dying for us, not all that Christ did for us. So here, when he brought the new covenant in, look how more easier it is.
Yes, okay, yeah.
Make it lighter for us.
Okay, now, yeah, you're right. Now, Leland wants to get to verse 17. It says, my Father is working until now, and I myself am working. For this reason, therefore, the Jews were seeking all the more to kill him, because he not only said he says he's the Son of God. Now, what is your question about this?
At this point, they're on Jesus for healing on the Sabbath also.
Yes.
But Jesus is saying, if I'm reading 17 correct, that God's working on the Sabbath, so he is.
Okay.
The purpose of the Sabbath was for what?
It was a day of rest, a day of worship, and a day of rest. Okay. Who else worked on the Sabbath? The priest did. It was their turn to be priests. They ought to be. What were they doing? They were offering sacrifices. They were doing the sacrificial part for all the people. So the priest, there's a question in the scriptures about do the priest. So they don't profane the Sabbath. They work on the Sabbath day because that's when they perform their duties. Many of them, but the scripture we've been studying in Genesis. God worked 6 days, and the seventh day he rested. But God is always available, so for our prayers and for forgiveness, and he's always watching. So I think that's what Jesus is saying here, that God is always available. He's always doing something. And Jesus said he's always working. Does that answer your question, or does that make it the water a little more muddy? You all right? Okay. You sure? Okay.
Virgil, I have a question.
Okay.
When Jesus asked him if he wanted to be healed, he didn't really say, yes, I want to be healed. He basically gave an excuse for why he wasn't being healed. And then Jesus turned around and healed him. And so my question is, a lot of times when we hear of Jesus healing people, the concept of faith comes into play.
Okay.
This man didn't seem to display a lot of faith. So,
He
did
didn't.
Jesus heal him at random? I mean,
He didn't know. He didn't really. Evidently, he didn't realize who Jesus was. No, I can't get in the water. You know, that's my. But there are several instances where Jesus healed people who did not necessarily show an act of faith. Somebody else may have shown an act of faith, but on that person's account. But that Lazarus is already dead. Jairus' daughter was already dead. And there were people who beseeched on their behalf, but those people didn't. They were already passed away. And that's two of the examples I can think of.
But the healing of those people carried more weight.
Yes.
Seems to.
Yeah.
Well, I can't believe this guy didn't say that's a stupid question.
Well, that's what you accused me of. But no, you accused somebody else of saying that one time. But you told me. But anyway, no, that's. But you're right. Anybody already.
The reason he's there.
Anybody already know I want to be healed. That's the reason I'm here. I've been here all day long waiting on that water.
I looked up the reason why people were at the pool because the scholars think it was a mikveh, a ritualistic cleansing pool for the Jews.
Yeah.
So they did things. That's probably why they gathered there.
so they almost had more faith in the water than they did in that pool than they did in the idea that Jesus could heal them.
Well, if the translation I read a while ago is correct, they had the faith that there was an angel going to come down and stir that water up, and the first person in got healed.
So if this is not really a lesson of faith, what is it that Jesus is wanting us to take from this particular? I mean, because it almost looks like Jesus healed him because Jesus chose to heal him, which is fine. But why did he get chose to be healed if it wasn't his faith?
But as you said earlier, Virgil, when people have exhausted all those other
Yeah.
options, they will grasp on to
Yeah.
anything.
Jesus knew this man that he wanted to be healed. Like I say, Leland said, "Why do you?" That been a lot of people say, "Well, that's a stupid question. No, if I didn't want to be healed, I wouldn't have been here to start out with." I've been home waiting on or been on the street corner begging for money instead.
There's such a clear parallel between this man and his encounter with Jesus and the physical healing that he experienced. I mean, there was really we have no proof that this man even knew who Jesus was.
No.
So, obviously, it's not based upon his faith. And And so for Jesus to walk up to him and say, do you want to be healed, is a legitimate question, because that really is the question that we have to ask really on a daily basis. Do we want to get better? Or are we willing to accept where we are? Have we accepted the status quo of daily living as it always has been as far as our knowledge of it is concerned? Or are we willing to allow Jesus to enter into the picture and make a change?
Jesus said, I stand at the door and knock. We got to let him in. And I said, this guy here, he didn't really know who Jesus was, but Jesus was actually knocking at his door.
It was an act of him giving so the other people could show that Jesus could do this.
Yes, it was not only
Not,
not only was he healed, but everybody there seen him healed, and then the Jews who still wouldn't go have it. They saw the man was healed. You know,
You would also think that had the man believed in Jesus, they'd just say, oh, he's just pretending.
yeah.
But that was the case. He was like, I didn't even know who this man was.
Didn't even know who he
Look at
was,
what
yeah.
happened. That's more of even a testament of God's
Yeah.
power.
You know, I haven't seen it in a long time, but there is a picture, an ancient picture, you know, back in Renaissance times, of a person who's supposed to represent Jesus knocking on the door, and a door, and there's no doorknob on the outside. And the man was criticized for the painting the picture, and he said, no, he said, you missed the point. Said Jesus won't force his way in. You have to open the door from the inside to let him in. You know, he's at the door knocking, but he's not going to force his way in. We got to open up and let him in. Yes.
I think one of the points to this story is because he did it on the Sabbath day.
Yeah, that's that. Yeah.
And that was his point. He's showing the rulers and stuff that he can heal on the Sabbath day. It's not wrong to do that.
Yeah, it's not wrong to do good on Sabbath day.
Well, it says in the scripture too, why he did it, because he told him that you've been sick for a long time, or you've been,
Yeah, Jesus knew he was been sick for a long time. Yeah.
so I mean, so that he was the reason he was there.
Yeah. That probably didn't answer your question, but
Yeah,
anyway.
I just think it's a really good lesson that your faith alone does not heal you. Jesus made this choice.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we hear that where people say, well, your faith just wasn't strong enough to heal you. And in this instance, the faith wasn't even an issue. Jesus chose to heal him. And, you know, and yes, the lesson goes on about the Sabbath, but that's the part that I find interesting here is that without the mention of faith, Jesus heals.
Yeah.
Or chooses not to.
I think also possibly it's an example that when Jesus tells us to feed the hungry, visit people in prison, he does not say anywhere there, and then they'll become a Christian. But we kind of tie that to that. Sometimes when we're helping people, we say, well, maybe they'll come to church, maybe they'll start doing this, which is wonderful if they do, but it does not say that. Jesus said, feed them, give them water, put clothes on their back, and visit them. So we're not supposed to make that a requirement in the beginning. If we see someone needs help, we need to help them. And he did that for this person.
Well, James wrote almost some of the same sentiments. James is, they believe, was the brother of Jesus. He wrote some of the same sentiments. If you see your brother or sister without anything to eat and no clothes, you say, well, I hope you get warm and hope you get full. You don't give them any clothes or any food, you haven't helped them any. So it doesn't say they had to be Christian. It said, you see somebody that, he said that if pure and undefiled religion is this, to help the fatherless and the widows in their affliction. So that's part of our duty is to help those. Jesus fed, if we was to keep on reading, Jesus feed 5,000 people, 5,000 men, besides the women and children. Not where all them we find later on, a lot of those people wasn't necessarily believing in him. They just wanted to get free food. Wanted to see a show. You know, let's just see if he heals somebody. But another point on this is it confirms that a sign is not a convincing point for everybody. You know, Jesus said an evil and adulterous generation looks for a sign. Lots of people still today are looking for a sign for this. Well, God, show me a sign to do this. God, show me a sign if I'm supposed to do this. Signs didn't convince everybody. If signs convinced everybody, they wouldn't have killed Jesus. You say, well, how do you prove that? Whenever they come after him, Judas betrayed him, Peter cut off his sword, or knife, whatever you want to call it. He cuts off the servant, the high priest. The servant's name was Malchus. He cuts off his right ear. Jesus picks it up and puts it back on. That ought to stop everybody. The doctors can't do that today. If for some reason you get your ear cut off, he's not just going to pick it up and stick it back on there and it'll be all right. He may get it back on there, but it's going to take a while. It's going to take a while. So that sign, that particular, should have stopped him right there. But it didn't. Any other questions?
You know, they said the first one in gets healed, you know, that was just a madhouse. That's what that was.
Sure.
Got stirred.
It's kind of like the first one up here gets $1,000. Well, you know, there'll be several people get stomped on on the way up here. You know.
Well, he'd been there for 38 years.
He's been there 38 years, yes.
And all he knew was a life that was surrounded by sick people.
Yes.
And so, it's all he knew. It's all he had ever experienced for 38 years. Think he might have gotten used to it? I mean, and that's the way a lot of people just, their growth and their inclination to come to Jesus is inhibited because they're so used to the lifestyle that they've lived for so long. And, you know, quite honestly, we have a hard time understanding why they can't just change. Well, they've been in this condition for decades. And so change is not real quick.
That's right.
For anybody, really.
Yeah. You know, if you do something every day for years and years, or get used to it, or certain things happen to you for years and years, it's hard to change. You're right. He's growling at me again, Caleb. Yeah, he's looking for that ice cream Grandpa had, I think. Any other questions or comments?
I never read this account without thinking about the premier military medical hospital in the United States.
Yes.
Which is at
Bethesda, Maryland, yes.
Maryland. I don't know if that's why they named the town Bethesda, or I have no idea.
You know, there's lots of towns in the United States that are named after something in the Bible. Antioch. You know, we got an Antioch community just a little ways from here.
I've always appreciated the aspect of healing
Yes.
associated with both.
Yeah. So whatever the case, whether the water actually healed them, whether there was actually an angel or not, like I say, my commentary kind of spoofed it off that there really wasn't an angel. That people was just convinced this was going to happen, you know, because kind of what a story that got told. But anyway, they were all convinced it was going to happen. somebody must have got better sometime, or they wouldn't have all been hanging around, just kept hanging around there, you know.
Well, figure he'd been there for 38 years, why
Yeah.
somebody hadn't got healed along the way.
Yeah,
Well, it depends on who the first person was that said that it was gonna happen.
yes,
I mean, if he was, someone that people respected and thought had some knowledge and wisdom and all that stuff, one person saying it, that can prove I'll do it sometimes, and even if it's not true.
yeah. Yeah, you're right. You know, I got in the water, and the water rippled, and I got in it, and you know, my feet's all right, or I can see better, or whatever, you know, and that's the way of a lot of these so-called faith healers today. Well, people, they can become convinced that somebody's going to make them better, and they for a while they think they're better.
Kind of like the placebo effect.
Yeah, placebo effect. You know, you was talking about the faith deal a while ago. A preacher a long time ago told about his uncle, and his uncle had a buddy, and I don't remember, one of them had a hand gone, one of them had a foot gone. And a certain healing minister that was pretty famous at the time came to town. And so this is where we need to go. And so they went down there and said, no, you don't have enough faith to be healed. Well, they had enough faith to go down there, but they didn't have the ability to heal them to start out with. But that was the excuse they gave. Well, you guys ain't got enough faith. But they did, or they wouldn't have went down there to start out with. But
You know, Virgil, I don't know what all that healing water and all that is, but it seems like a lot of the sin goes back to money.
yeah,
I don't know if they were, I don't know, today's term, that concession stand there and all that good stuff, hey, you come in and like today, people they call preachers heal people, again, come in their building,
yeah.
and they donate all this money. I don't know, that may have been something like that.
Well, you know,
They say they were healed.
yeah, it's just a couple of years ago where Jesus kicks all the money changers out of the temple
Yeah.
because they're in there buying and selling sacrificial animals, you know. And evidently they was cheating the people. It wasn't against the law to sell somebody an animal to sacrifice. But evidently they were cheating people, and they had them all in the temple. And you can imagine, you know, if you've ever been inside a locked up building with lots of farm animals, why the smell would be pretty bad, you know.
It seems like it always leads to that.
Yeah, they were making money off of it. Yeah, you're right. Okay. I'm out of anything to say for once. Caleb, you gonna take over?
I'm gonna write that down.
Well, you might are too. That don't happen very often, but Leland's letting me down. He usually asks me a whole bunch of questions, and I thought, well, Leland will keep me going for an hour or two, but he didn't do it. So, but I think I got after. There's some kid coming here a while ago with Cody did. I think had a shirt on that said Eastern Oklahoma State College 1908 sermon, and I said that's celebrating Leland's birthday, 1908, but.
You could take up the rest of the time showing us that hippo song, brother.
No, that's your job. You get to do the hippo song. Okay, thank everybody for being here, but like I say, unless you got some more questions, well, I'm talked out, so. Everybody can visit till the kids get back in there. And Leland's y'all heard me, Leland's gonna lead the hippo song for them when they get back in here.